Welcome to the Autosport Q&A videos and podcasts. This is a weekly edition where we feature your questions and put your questions to the experts. And if you want to get involved, you can put your questions in the comments section below here on YouTube, or give us a follow on Instagram at Autosport, and wait for the inbox at the start of each week. Get your questions in and then we'll start grilling the journos about it. And this week I'm delighted to be joined by Alex Kalinauckas and Kevin Turner. Gents, how are you doing? First of all, Kevin, it's been a week since I've seen you. Good week?
Yeah, I bought a new shirt, you see.
It's lovely. And you ironed it.
Well, it's so new, it didn't even need an iron. That'll have to be for the next edition.
Straight out of the packaging. If you're listening to this, by the way, Kevin is wearing a beautifully pressed shirt, as is Alex Kalinauckas. And last time...
It's a lie.
What's what the comments say?
Last time I saw you, you were about to get on a plane to Mexico doing some weird exercises every hour or so. How did that go?
Yeah, that was fine. Austin first, then Mexico. Delayed getting out of Mexico by a volcano, which is a new experience. Feel like it was F1 2010 all over again. But no, yeah, back held up fine. This chair's not too good for it, but maybe I'm just...
Not all heroes wear capes. We'll get through it. Now, we have got a fair bit of news to come along with to start. So let's have a look at some of the questions and some of the news. And the first bit of breaking news meant we had to rewrite the script yesterday. I say we, the producer, I had nothing to do with it. This is all about the FIA race director, Niels Wittich, who has stepped down with immediate effect. This is after the Brazil Grand Prix. And sort of the question is, what made this happen? What forced this decision, and why so urgently, Alex?
Yeah, it's interesting. A lot happened yesterday, and if I were a cynic, which I am, I would suggest that, particularly when it came to the stuff we're going to talk about with the teams, with Alpine and Aston Martin, they will have known that the announcement of F1's 75 celebration, everything going off the O2, they would have known that was coming. A good day to very bad news. Completely sort of everything overtaken by the race director, F1 race director, leaving, Niels Wittich. Now, it's almost classic FIA of this era. Something's happened, it's been communicated appallingly, and there's all sorts of speculation about it. But the wording of the statement is very confusing because it implies that he's left voluntarily immediately. Now, no one resigns with immediate effect. That's just not how things work. And then there's other suggestions. There's a respected German journalist, Christian Menath, saying that he's spoken to Niels Wittich and said, and had it confirmed that he hasn't left by choice. I have no reason to doubt that information. So, yeah, it's my takeaway of it, the timing, the fact that he's gone 3 races before the end of the season for a very high-profile event in Las Vegas, where there was a catastrophe last year with the track that ultimately was down to FIA sign-off, various things. Like, the timing of it suggests that he has not gone voluntarily. And again, it's another massive blow to the FIA, another high profile person going, not staying long in a job. And the question now is, why has this happened? And as of yet, we don't have those answers.
It follows on 2022 when he took over from Massey. Are we allowed to say Massey? I think we can, without people huge backlash on social media.
As long as you don't say Abu Dhabi 2021.
Fine, we didn't say that. That's great.
Right.
We'll fix that in post. Anyway, it sort of follows on from he took over from Michael Massey. He was in the position for a fairly short period of time, as Alex says just there. And it is immediate effect. And it must have some links to what happened in Brazil. But 3 Grand Prix to go, it's strange. Why don't you just see it out the course of the season and then redress it in the winter?
Yeah, I agree. It's a bit strange, isn't it? It seems a bit knee-jerk. I think it's not, what happened in Brazil. Yeah, nothing was that bad in Brazil.
I disagree that that's what the... there's the one question ultimately is what happened with the sprint race and why it took so long to throw the virtual safety car just as the McLarens finally enacted the team orders that should have been happening since lap 1, basically. That if you were looking to get rid of someone, that's something that you would potentially use as an excuse. But what did he do wrong in the wet race? Like, the big question mark is why teams like McLaren and Mercedes pitted their leading drivers. Like, everything was followed, as far as I could see, correctly, given that the big problem is the spray, not the tyres.
Yeah, I think the point about 2021 Abu Dhabi, we were joking about it, but like, that was unprecedented. Mm-hmm. Like, that doesn't tally with the other 1,100 races the World Championships run. So there were serious questions that needed to be asked, and things did need to happen. I don't really feel like we've got an equivalent. No. So it seems very strange to me.
Yeah, it's just sort of big ... isn't it? It's like, what has happened that we don't know about, or you guys in particular don't know about, and how will you get to the bottom of it?
Well, speaking to Niels himself, ideally to the FIA, it can be a little bit of a tricky organisation to deal with, but generally they do provide the answers. It just comes a long time sort of after the fact. So yeah, our journos will be on the ground in Las Vegas and they'll be doing their digging.
My gut instinct is you can't really see a reason why, and the fact it's with immediate effect dictates a firing as opposed to a resignation.
Yeah, again, we don't know this, so we can't say that for sure. But yeah, 100%. It's as we say, the timing, and like I said, who resigns with immediate effect, like it's your choice.
Just very quickly touch on who's going to follow after him for the next 3 Grand Prix and what might happen moving on into 2025. Is it likely that the F2, F3 race director will just assume that role and become the Formula One race director until he resigns?
Yeah. Right. I don't see why not. I mean, obviously there were other race directors in other championships. Eduardo Freitas, the WEC director, started off sharing with Niels Wittich in terms of sharing that role. There's Scott Elkins in Formula E. I could be wrong, but I think he was in race control in Abu Dhabi in 2021. So maybe that's not a direction that would happen. But yeah, it's the sort of thing, if it goes well, they won't make a change until they make a change. It's just it's the FIA in this era.
It's got nothing to do with the way that the race start happened, didn't happen, etc., etc. The way that was dealt with, it's no implication that it was down to him.
I wouldn't have thought so, because that was driver error, wasn't it?
Right.
Basically, Max Verstappen read the rule book. He knew he wasn't supposed to go when there wasn't a green light. So I think it's a driver error rather than a race control one.
Actually, Max Verstappen showed some brilliance there, because he just sat on that grid and said, "I'm not going anywhere because I know." It was another one of the things of Max Verstappen sitting in that moment, processing what was going on, and doing what a world champion does.
Well, funnily enough, when you have 60 pole positions in like a 3-year span, you're very well drilled in what to do if there's an aborted start. And Red Bull, Jonathan Wheatley, their team manager, I mean, you can listen, you can hear it on the audio when there's like a red flag, he comes on and it's clear instructions for what the drivers have to do. So yeah, I mean, Max completely would have known what to do. But yeah, with that, I don't see that as why was that contentious? It had no impact on the outcome of the race. And I mean, honestly, it's almost like it's akin to pit lane speeding, right? It's like it's serious enough because you don't want cars on track when there might be like marshals or safety equipment out there, but it's like you also don't want cars speeding in the pit lane. So it's kind of like the drivers were reprimanded, fines, things like that. That's what should cover that. I don't see this as the smoking gun of why Wittich has lost his job.
Right, okay, so watch this space, listen to this space, depending on how you're consuming this wonderful content. The next bit of news then, and this is about Alpine. Another bit of news coming from yesterday, this buried in all the news, was that Alpine announced that they're switching to Mercedes power units and gearboxes from 2026. What will this do for Alpine and Anglo-French relations, with the team itself?
I mean, short term, it's very pragmatic, isn't it? And it's probably on the face of it, a good idea. I think it's really sad, personally, because that factory has a long history. We talked about this before. Has a long history, turbocharging, bring that to F1. The dominant force in Formula One in the 1990s. And Alpine should have a Renault engine, like it is a Renault. So to have a Mercedes in the back, it's I suppose things move on, and maybe it's the pragmatic approach. But I think it's a sad day, honestly.
Yeah, I think it's short term gain, long term pain. I mean, we know the Alpine engine wasn't producing as much power as the others. There was a reason why last year they tried to do the whole engine equalisation, I should say, approach and get the other teams on board. And it being Formula One, they went, "Oh, well, obviously we're not going to help you." So it's an upgrade immediately when it comes to power. There's lots of chat about the Mercedes engine potentially being class leading again come 2026. So yeah, that's all good. But I agree with you, Kev. It's against the ethos of Formula One. But I sort of am a little bit conflicted about this because it brings Alpine more along the line of the Haas model. And I almost don't care about that. Like, that's actually a greater sort of, this isn't what Formula One is, or, what it has evolved to be. And I don't mind Haas. So therefore, I don't care that much about what Alpine is doing, other than the fact, and just very quickly, serious problem, the threat to jobs is appalling. And I think that's a real mark of shame on Alpine for doing this.
Also, you've got a manufacturer that doesn't make its own engine. That is Haas is a customer. Yeah. They're different types. So is this basically a prequel to them being sold? Is this basically getting it all set up so that Renault and Alpine can withdraw?
I mean, it makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Then it makes more sense. But I still feel sorry for the people there who work there.
But should there be some additional rule? Formula One loves rules, saying if you are a factory team, if you're carrying an Alpine name or an Aston Martin name, they're Mercedes, or different Ferrari, for example, should you be forced to use a power unit that is made by your in-house team? If you are an engine manufacturer,
No, I
many of
probably
these
wouldn't
are.
go that far.
No,
I think
because then-
that's too probably restrictive.
Like, well, how do you allow Red Bull in? Because you're an energy drinks manufacturer.
But that's what I mean. If you're Haas or if you're Red Bull or something that isn't that is it's a generic team, that is there something that you should say? If you're Ferrari, they're always going to always have a Ferrari engine.
I don't think that's necessary. I feel like it's just weird enough that the car company wouldn't want that to happen. It's a bit like the suggestion that Toyota the suggestion that Toyota partnering with Haas is, preluding them buying that team. Well, you're not going to have a Toyota with a Ferrari engine in the back. Like, unless this is the new model, I don't see that. Why would Toyota do that from a prestige point of view?
It's also, I think, specific to this case. So Aston Martin have been running Mercedes engines and we haven't really cared, because Aston Martin doesn't have that long history of Formula One engines. But that Renault department just has, and it just feels, maybe I'm a bit of a purist and old school and the rest of it, but it feels really sad that
Purist. That's bold.
I'll take that.
But this all seems to coincide with the restructuring at the top as well, Alpine, doesn't it? That these decisions seem to be being made since that change has happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's been everything. Things keep changing every 5 minutes. I mean, it's not quite as bad as it was 12 months ago, 6 months ago, but it does feel. It's a very volatile environment, isn't it? So they probably do need a bit of stability.
Yeah, and you get stability by ripping up the rule book and changing your engine supply, do you?
Well, no, but you get the short-term boost. So if Briatore obviously wanted to come in and have an impact, and there's a very easy gain, which again, if you read the science and suggest this is the team eventually being sold, it all makes a lot of sense. I mean, he came out quite openly, and I thought it was a bit gross, really, the way he talked about the cuts that he's already made and the job losses. So yeah, it's just the result of that. I've come in, I can make an immediate impact, and I can get an immediate gain, which he will do, as I said, because the Mercedes engine. Well, I mean, the current Mercedes engine is more powerful than the current Alpine. The Renault. The suggestion is that the work that was going on towards that 26 power unit, they didn't have a lot of faith in it anyway. So yeah, in the short term, it's an instant gain.
They got some good points last time out, so it did propel them up the constructors a fair bit of extra money in the back pocket there as well. Just very, very quickly then, you've both mentioned it, that it could be a precursor to the team being sold. Is that what you expect? Just if you could look into your crystal ball.
I mean, Alex is probably better connected to the.
He's got a better crystal ball, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but I would say yes. And is it a way for Andretti to come in?
Well, I would say look at who employed Oliver Oakes previously. And the Mazepins, like that was the team that the high tech team in the junior formula. That's what I would expect to be more likely. The Andretti thing, that makes way more sense on paper, but there seems to be so many silly barriers. This whole argument of they don't bring anything. Well, what on earth does Alpine bring now, if not just more money for Mercedes?
Let's stick with silly barriers. Right, this is the news that the GPDA launched their own Instagram page, straight away put out a statement that was very critical of the FIA president, Mohammed Ben Sulayem. What do we think about that and the statement talking about silly barriers? I think it links it quite nicely. What do we think of the statement they made?
I mean, that links more to Niels Wittich being fired than decisions made in Brazil on the face of it. It seems to be it could potentially have been a knee-jerk reaction because the FIA president is named outright, and this is directed completely at him. And Wittich has been the one, particularly when it comes to things like Jewelry Gate, that has been charged with enacting an FIA vision. A lot of things. Jewelry Gate is one of them. The other thing is the swearing ban. They're very reasonable things that the FIA is asking. They're basically like, if a driver's wearing a metal watch and is caught in a fire, we don't want them to be really badly burned because they've got metal on them. The same with the swearing, right? We don't want what happened in Brazil, a driver swearing about bullshit. You'll have to that, producers.
Don't
qualifying.
Bleep the wrong word.
Absolutely
Bleep the wrong word. Bleep the ball bit.
Yeah. He, in qualifying, and it unleashed a wave of hatred on social media about race control. That's exactly what they want to stamp out. So these two things, very reasonable as far as I can see, communicated appallingly, and the drivers feel like they're being targeted, victimized. I mean, how can you be a millionaire Formula One driver and really be a victim? But that's another issue. I think it all comes down to that. It's like, with the fact that the drivers have gone so hard, taken so hard against some of these FIA policies, maybe that's why the axe sort of swung for Wittich and things like that. But the fact that it's targeted at the FIA president, that really will have got under his skin. We know he's a man who demands to command respect and doesn't necessarily have it, because there's a line in that the GPDA mentioned the underpants thing. I mean, it almost felt mocking to me. And again, they want them to be wearing the right safety equipment so they don't get harmed when they're burned. But it all comes down to that point, that there's just this animosity and it's not being resolved.
There's got to be some consideration though, like for the watches. I mean, jewelry gate, and then Lewis Hamilton wearing 3 watches and 48 chain necklaces. That was very funny. I thought that was extremely funny. 3 watches, each telling different times. It was part of the Red Bull problem, wasn't it? The analogy they ran a few weeks ago, they had 3 different watches. Their analogy of what was going on inside their team, but. The jewelry thing makes sense, right? As you say, I highlight that. I think that makes sense. But in the heat of the moment, there's some driver swearing over team radio. Okay, not Sonoda, but another one. Over team radio. In the heat of the moment, you can understand, because it happens in every single sport. Tennis, rugby, football, all the sports, it happens. It's the press conference, it's the more kind of casual swearing that I think we all look at and go, yeah, just don't swear in that environment. But if it's out on track and it's legitimate, surely, Kevin, you can allow that and say, knock yourself out, if not literally, but
Yeah. I mean, I think it's one of those things, like Alex says, it's kind of coming from a not ridiculous place, because kids do watch motorsport. My kids watch. Well, one of them watches the Grand Prix. The other one doesn't have enough attention span for that. Goes on to something else.
The one you love, which is the
no favourites. But yeah,
just the one he named after Max Verstappen.
Yeah. Can I officially say that's not the case before this becomes a thing?
Lewis, isn't it?
He's called Max though. So I think it's coming from a reasonable place, but it's just been taken too far. And I think MBS getting directly involved, I think his problem, one of the reasons he's coming up against this stuff, he's just too involved in the minutiae as a president. Like, you didn't have Jean Todt appearing in Parc Ferme to give him all a big pat on the back. And,
the medals on the podium.
All that stuff. He's too involved. Like, he too wants to be part of it. If he wants to have a bit more, respect, as you say, actually, he would be better off stepping back a little bit, not being seen to try and be all chummy, but then telling them what to do. Like, he's wants to be their mate, but wants to be in charge, and it's a bit, just stand back, be presidential, and I think that's probably not helped him. But I'm pleased that the Grand Prix Drivers Association is having a voice on things. I think that in recent history you could say that drivers have made a lot more sense than a lot of other people involved in motorsport. So I think that it's good that they're wanting to get involved and wanting to have a say. It should be through more official channels than social media. Let's be honest. It should be part of a go and discuss it behind closed doors, and perhaps it's indicative of the way things have gone.
They feel
they need to.
They're not being listened to. It's what they feel like. But I think there's 2 elements to it. One, great that the drivers are taking this stand. I approve of that. I do think they undermine themselves quite significantly by being massively out of touch on the please don't fine us and take our massive amounts of money away. I mean, if you get caught speeding on the road, you pay a fine. Like, why is that?
Yeah, that was a bit weird. That was like someone threw that into the conversation at the end. It's like, yeah, we'll put that in at the end. That's fine. It's like, no, just leave that out.
I mean, again, there is a good legitimate question about what do these fines go to paying for, and the point they've made about stewards. And again, this is what's so weird about Wittich going. This is not race control that the drivers had a problem with. It was the stewarding decisions, how the stewards panels are made up, why they're not permanent, and everything like that. I mean, look, if you don't want to do monetary fines, fine, they have to be harsher then. Yuki Tsunoda has to be banned for what he said over the radio in Austria, as opposed to a massive fine. But the secondary element with all of this is it just fundamentally comes back to the point that they're not clamping down on drivers swearing over the radio. They're just not. MBS just expressed it appallingly. Like, it's already bleeped out at source in the FOM broadcast. It's not if you listen to the live feeds on the channels, because they do understand that these are human beings doing something very difficult. It's what it honestly is, that the potential for a massive pile-on from the audience onto race officials, like going like Tom Howard, our rallying correspondent, Sebastian Ogier, massive fine, didn't swear. It was all about the potential for his fans to then pile on and abuse race officials on social media, potentially in person, we don't know. And that's exactly what happened in Brazil. So that, I get, it's perfectly reasonable what they're doing. It's just the communication around it, again, has been awful. Yeah,
and on the team radio point, we've mentioned this before. Broadcasters have a choice. They run it, they play it, they don't play it. They put the graphic up, they put asterisks, they can do things to it. They don't have to play that audio out if it's going to be contentious. So,
we have the same thing, don't we? We have to have a debate as to what language we include, what we star out, what we take out altogether.
You star too much out.
I know. That's I'm a bit old school, so I get a little bit criticised for that. But I do imagine a kid picking up the magazine, right? So, if only. But yeah, that's the line I draw. So it's going to be slightly different depending on what your brand is, what your medium is, all that sort of stuff, and how much time you've got to respond to it.
It comes down to, what are some swear words worse than others? Do they have a list of the A category, the B class, the C class, and you get this fine if it's an A word? And
let's not make it any more complicated.
Too many cans of worms and with worms all over the floor. Next topic, then we've got to get through these. We've got very little time left here. We've got a clock ticking down. I'm not sure what happens when it gets to 0. If we get ejected from our seats or something, let's find out, shall we?
I think we will find out.
Fred Vasseur has teased the idea about teams potentially tanking 2025 to gain extra wind tunnel time for 2026. How legitimate is this claim, this concern?
I mean, they're going to do it if they can get away with it, surely, especially if you're not front running. Like, the earlier you realise that you are not in the mix for 25, why would you keep ploughing away? That you're going to divert as much as you reckon you can get away with to 2026. Yeah, we've seen that before, haven't we, with rule changes. Ferrari pretty much gave up on 2021, quite rightly, and hit 2022 with the new ground effect rules, actually really impressively. They had a really good car. Yeah, they lost for reasons that we've discussed many times, and I don't think exist actually anymore under Vasseur. I think he's fixed a lot of the problems.
Silverstone was a bit weird with the wet tyre decision making. But anyway.
But I'd say they've made more good strategy calls than bad ones, and their pit stops have been good. So I think Fred Vasseur is running a good ship at Ferrari. It's quietly, here they come sort of thing. But yeah, you can imagine a team going, Aston Martin, you'd go 25 in the bin, Adrian, spend your entire time, as much time as possible on 26.
But is this Fred Vasseur getting in early, like Christian Horner would with certain things, and sowing that seed of doubt for everyone to watch and say, are they sandbagging because of the wind tunnel time in 2026, Alex?
Oh, massively. It's as ever. It's the Piranha Club mentality. It's always try and find an edge however you can. And I was thinking about this on the way in because, we have lots of time to prepare for our notes for these videos. And I was on the tube and I was like, it's a bit weird that Fred Vasseur is the one concerned about this because his team is expecting to be in the title fight. So why would he be talking about tanking? But it's because he expects to be in the title fight. This tells me that Ferrari very, very confident for next year. But yeah, it's Aston Martin, it's Alpine that we've already talked about, and it's definitely RB. Watch what happens with RB next year because there's so many teams. McLaren in particular are really paranoid about the RB Red Bull link. So if RB are way down the bottom and have more wind tunnel time, their fear is that can somehow end up benefiting Red Bull. The FIA, as far as I'm aware, is satisfied that there is no sufficient link. But now that we know that RB, AlphaTauri as it was, Toro Rosso, being brought to work more closely with Red Bull, the fear is, someone goes to the pub, two engineers from the two different teams, and the ideas are exchanged somehow. Like I said, there's no suggestion there's no proof that that's what's happening, but that is 100% what the non-Red Bull teams amongst the front-running squads fear, and it was a huge bugbear for McLaren, and clearly, potentially Ferrari feel the same.
So for you, it's the source of this claim that this might happen indicates just how powerful Ferrari think they might be in 2025, which is an interesting. Well, yeah,
because why would they consider tanking?
Yeah.
If they think they can win the world title next year, which on the face of it looks like they'll be able to if it all resets to 0 and we end up as everyone hopes that we're going to get, who knows who's going to win, like any given Sunday sort of thing that we've got at the moment. If that carries on, Ferrari are right in the hunt. So why on earth would they be tanking? So it suggests to me they're pretty confident.
You just mentioned the link between Red Bull and RB or Racing Bulls, whatever they're going to be called next year. Kevin, is there this link there? I mean, as Alex said, the FIA are happy that there's no direct link, but surely there has to be some element if you're a sister team, such a clear sister team, that there could be some use. It's
hard
data.
to imagine that there wouldn't be, but on the other hand, the cars have been actually quite different, I would say, like the characteristics of them. There was all that hoo-ha about, some of the RBs doing slow speed corners at the end of last year. And it's like, well, did the RB20 come out and be if anything, they've struggled a bit more, so I think it's one of those things, it's a classic case in F1 where people imagine a bigger problem than there is. Is it ideal that one company owns two F1 teams? Probably not, but you want cars on the grid. So, Yeah, for me, it's probably not as big a deal as the other teams think. But then, maybe I'll be wrong in 2026 if RB come out with the best car or something.
Well, a pig just flew past the window. There you go. Next question then.
A pigeon flew into it once when I was here a few weeks ago.
So
Yeah, they were terrifying.
Excellent. Where did the pigeon end up? Do we know?
No, it just bounced off. Hopefully it survived. Anyway.
I'm sure it did. Somebody was having a lovely meal down there when I left the building. Now the next question. Oh, about Aston Martin. There's a question about Aston Martin. What do you think, or why do you think Aston Martin has struggled so much this year? And this is also linked to the story that Dan Fallows is stepping down as technical director. So go on, Alex.
Yeah, it's interesting. He appears to have had the Toto Wolff treatment of what to do with problems around technical directors, or too many technical directors, as it appears to Aston Martin. No longer in his role, left his role, but is within the group. So he's not just out. I would suspect that sooner or later he'll be working for another organisation. But yeah, interesting. I spoke to Dan Fallows in Austin for our season review material, which is going to be slightly, you have to plan carefully what we do with that, but still legitimate to hear what he says about the car, because he was the one who designed it. So yeah, it's very interesting what's gone on there. It tells me more about the problem that Aston have got, this ridiculous problem of having 3 top level technical people. You've got Adrian Newey, we know, arriving in March 25. We've got Enrico Cardiel from Ferrari joining to be Adrian Newey, Chief Technical Officer, the role Newey had at Red Bull, and you already had Dan Fallows there. So obviously, I mean, you'd hope it would work, but clearly something's not worked.
You can see what has happened there, haven't you? Like, Lawrence has gone and go, right, it's the best I can get anywhere, and just like blanket bombing. And obviously he got Fallows, and now he's got Newey, so he doesn't need Fallows, does he? So it's an upgrade in his mind, I'm sure. It's just get everyone in the door and then sort it out afterwards is probably the approach, which might also hint at why it hasn't worked yet, because it's not coherent, is it? I mean, I think that, Mike Crack's made the point before that actually they were artificially high at points last year because Ferrari and Mercedes in particular weren't doing a good job. So it made Aston, they were still half a minute behind Red Bull, but that was good enough for third. Whereas now if you're half a minute behind a Red Bull, you might be 7th, 8th, 10th, whatever, except in the wet Brazil. So they were probably artificially high, but clearly they've got more fundamental problems than that, because they keep bringing upgrades that don't really work. And, we've hinted at it before, they kind of are getting to the point where they need 2 strong drivers as well to maximise it. Lance Stroll doesn't score enough points, so they're reliant on Fernando Alonso, and he's not getting any younger, is he? I mean, he's amazing, but I think they do need to be looking at the second car as well. But yeah, more fundamentally, the structure they've got on the technical side, it will look very different this time next year, I'm sure.
So the struggles aren't necessarily driver lineup, although you've hinted to the fact that you need to have 2 strong drivers to gain points. You can't put all the weight on Fernando's ageing bones, can you? But there are other things going on there that hint that it's behind the scenes that Aston Martin's been struggling this season. Next season, then, I mean, Kev just says there that expects it to be a different story perhaps behind the scenes next year. Do you expect that as well?
Well, you'd hope so, because it's the classic Formula One thing, in that they felt that they gained for 24, but everybody else gained so much more, and they got leapfrogged. Just like talking to Dan Fallows in Austin, he was saying that the main thing we tried to do was make the car quick everywhere and have an adaptable car that would work over a big range of circuits, which is exactly the Red Bull model. And he sort of said we were only partially successful in that, and at the same time, the development program, the development plan, again went off track, as it did in 23, and also just left them with a really narrow performance operating window, so that when it works fine, but the other cars are quicker now, and when it doesn't work, they're just nowhere. But there's also this sort of glaring question that actually Fred Vasseur, to bring him up again, has talked quite openly about with Ferraris, the whole flexi wing. I mean, some people are sick of talking about it. Some people find it really, really fascinating. It does appear that flexi wings are now more tolerated than they were in previous years. And so Ferrari have suddenly gone, hang on a minute, well, we need to get on this. And they have done, or they appear to have done, and they're doing very well. Aston Martin, the sort of suggestion is that maybe they were a little bit conservative on that, because there was this suggestion in 2023 that they were doing that, and the FA asked them not to do it. Again, there was no proof of wrongdoing, because it's the classic thing in Formula One. If you're doing something and then we say it's illegal and then you don't do it, it was never illegal. But I'm not getting into that. What I'm getting at is Aston have been a little bit burned, I think, and therefore haven't pursued that as aggressively as they might have done.
So they've been tentative, but it might all change for 2025.
Well, 26 surely for them. It's like, they're going to have a newie car, Honda engine, which will be good, I'm sure. And, Fernando, if he gets a sniff of being competitive, he'll be right back on it again. So, yeah, I think a bit of pain before we see them back up at the front again, I think.
Talking about pain, I can hear the ejector seat motors are whirring into gear.
Which one of us goes first?
I think it's probably you.
Right, okay.
It's whoever's spoken longest, and it's not me. We used to do it like chess. We have a little timer for each person, right? So F1 has announced that ahead of the 75th anniversary, this is directly for you guys that are used to going to the car launches, multiple car launches. There's going to be one car launch for the 75th anniversary. F1 75 live, all 10 manufacturers, all 10 cars are going to be revealed at this one event.
Not quite. It's all 10 liveries.
Well, all 10 liveries, yeah.
So this is the key question, because if I hadn't interrupted you and you were going to ask me what my opinion of this was, I think it's a complete travesty for Formula One fans. I really do. So okay, there's a big word there that just says tragedy on. Tragedy, travesty. Well,
tragedy.
Whatever, it's fine. I'm happy.
Karaoke last night, wasn't it for you?
That was Saturday night in Liverpool. But anyway, I just think that. First of all, so there's no confirmation that the teams are still going to do their own separate things where they actually reveal the cars.
Right.
Hopefully they will, because I think as F1 fans, everyone gets more out of that because you understand how the teams are feeling coming into the year. More detail about what the cars might potentially perform like. They are very guarded in what they show a lot of the times, and some teams do just do liveries. But to do this all at once, you reduce that time massively. And also you just lose, and I think this is really sad for long-term Formula One fans, for new Formula One fans, just for Formula One fans in general. You lose that 2-week period where it's like, oh, on this day it's this car, and we get to see that, and we get to talk about that and wonder about that. Someone actually on Kev, as you know, I frequent the comments under Autosport articles all the time.
Yeah, that's strategic error.
Someone's made the point, like, it's almost like an advent calendar. And this day, I'm getting this treat, and I'm going to see what that is, and you potentially lose that, and I think that's really bad.
I would accept that if it weren't for the fact in recent years it's just been a series of livery launches that they haven't been honest about. Here's the new car, and then you look at it and go, it's not actually though, is it? You have to wait until the first day of testing or the day before testing before it rolls out. So I have two different answers. This from a professional point of view, yes, we want as many different livery launches and car launches and all the rest of it to create interest and clicks and all the rest of it. From a sort of more of a fan personal point of view, get all the nonsense livery launches out the way in one big razzmatazz event instead of 10 slightly annoying razzmatazz events. Like, just make something absolutely enormous of it. So from a fan's point of view, I'm like, yeah, go on, let's give it a try. Why not try something different?
What's the order going to be? Reverse championship order this year? You got to wait till the front runners come last. Is it going to be like a Royal Rumble? They're all going to get put into a ring at the end. You know what's going to happen there?
Yes, good question.
I mean, there will be some element of wait till the end for the big ones, won't there?
Yeah, I expect there will be. I guess the other big question is, will we get proper car launches afterwards?
Yeah.
Because we're not from a technical point of view, we're not going to learn a lot from that day. It's not for us. It's not really for the technical geeks. It's for I look at that nice new shiny livery type thing.
You'd imagine that each different team will want to have their own specific car launch that they can take full control of, because they are control freaks by nature, aren't they?
Well, this is why it's bad for some of the teams as well, particularly the small teams, because you get what potentially might be days of coverage, or at the very least hours of coverage for your sponsors, your new sponsors. That may be reduced to minutes now. And like, the production, it's the same production company who did the Las Vegas Grand Prix opening ceremony last year. I was there, I saw it, and it was done in reverse championship order. But the point about that I think is pertinent to this, it was very short. The drivers were up, they were lifted up in these ridiculous lifts. They were there for a few seconds each. They all hated it, by the way. I mean, Max Verstappen, before he turned up in an Elvis jumpsuit, really hated it. There was, yes, it just strikes me once again as style over substance. And that's, but if you're a new sponsor for a team like Haas or Williams or Sauber now these days, you've signed a deal because you're going to get as much exposure for your brand as you want, and now suddenly it's massively reduced. That's a potentially huge problem for
But that's an argument to do your own launch then later, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which
hopefully they will.
When you've got something other than a few licks of paint to show off, like you could do your own launch, and then you then get exposure on the big event that hopefully gets more eyeballs on it because it's everything, but then you still do your own thing. So I don't know, a smart team, I feel like they could still make it work for them, but I guess we'll just have to see how it pans out. But I'm not going to call it a travesty just yet.
So final question then for this epic episode is about Lewis Hamilton. So he is going to have a test in a 2-year-old car. What do you expect from him next year? Can he mount a title challenge, Alex?
100%. I think, as we said, Fred Vasseur and Ferrari clearly feel they're going to be in the hunt. And yeah, as I listened to the podcast from last week, as Kev said, Charles Leclerc will out-qualify basically every single time. But Lewis, more often than not, I suspect, will be either right there or ahead of him in the races if Ferrari are in the hunt, as we suspect. Like he is making more errors than he used to, but he's still making fewer errors than other people. And also he knows better than anyone else, although Lando Norris is getting pretty close, how hard you have to race Max Verstappen to win a world title.
What you tend to find with the sort of ageing veterans, for want of a better term, and I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, is their one lap pace tends to go first. And they're so that peak performance falls off a little bit, but providing they don't fall off a total cliff, which I don't think Lewis Hamilton has done. You see it with Fernando Alonso. When they get a sniff of something, like the British Grand Prix actually with Lewis, it was kind of there were several drivers that could have won that race, and he went, I remember I have to do this, bang. And he was Verstappen was second. There's probably a reason that, I mean, okay, I know there was some strategic miscues as well, to be fair to some of the other drivers, but you know, they struggle when they get a bit further on in your career, especially if you won 7 world titles and you've got a car that you can't really work with and it's not great, and it must be difficult to find the motivation to really get your 100% best. Whereas if you're suddenly in a competitive situation, the car's doing what you want, he's not forgotten how to drive an F1 car. So I think if the Ferrari's good, which it feels like it would, I mean, I'll be quite excited if I were a Ferrari fan, because with Leclerc and Hamilton, you've kind of got every base covered pretty much now, haven't you? And they seem to be better on strategy, so they just need the hardware. So, yeah, that's what we'll find out, I guess, in the early months of 2025.
So for you, Kev, his 1 lap pace might have dropped a bit. It's whether he's got the stamina for a 24 Grand Prix marathon season and can keep it going for that period of time.
Yeah, I mean, if he's in the championship fight, he'd do 36 races, wouldn't he?
Fine. Alex?
100%. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how fired up he is come the start of next season, because at the moment you're getting a Lewis where it's like, this car's just so unpredictable. What's going on? If he knows that Ferrari's good come testing, I'm honestly, I'm excited for F1 next year. I think everybody else should be too. Win
title number 8 and retire. Thankfully, we've got Lewis Hamilton for a bit longer, because that didn't happen back in 2021. Look, gents, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to leave that just there hanging like the sword of Damocles over my own head. Thank you very much indeed. Look, hopefully you enjoyed this episode. Like and subscribe to stay up to date with all of our content. And if you want to get your questions in next week as we run up to the final triple header of the season, make sure you put your questions in the comments below, or follow us on Instagram at Autosport, and keep your eyes open for the inbox, which opens next week. We'll be back at the same time next week as well to do it all again, maybe with the same panel. We don't quite know at this stage, but as always, thank you very much for watching, and thank you two for your company.